Well, we got Ukraine in the news again this week, but in this case, it's a Ukrainian that has been running a crime as a service, and he has just been arrested. It'll be interesting to find out exactly why, and you'll find out right now. You might have heard of it, and you might have been caught in the middle of it because they stole 50 million people's unique credentials. Now, this was also, by the way, forms of identification. So email addresses, bank account numbers, cryptocurrency addresses, and credit card numbers. Of course, cryptocurrency account numbers. It goes on and on. So this guy was a young guy. He's in his 20s, and he decided he wanted to make a bunch of money. And as you know, there's a lot of criminals out there, and many of them aren't very bright. So if you are bright and you are a criminal, what might you do? There has been a whole industry that came about that is called crime as a service. Now, we've heard about all these as a service things. You go to Azure, you can get as a service these servers that you can use, or Windows accounts, or maybe you've got Microsoft 365. You can go to Amazon Web Services. Man, they've got a ton of services, far more than what Azure has. And it's really nice because you don't have to really do much or do anything in some cases. They just take care of it for you. So you might have a huge database. Amazon will take care of it for you. They'll run it, they'll upgrade it. They'll rely on you to make sure it's secure, lock it down, and that has been, frankly, the source of a whole lot of breaches over the years where people didn't really know what they were doing, didn't really lock it down, and that includes government agencies, and so it was stolen. As a service is a big deal. Have you heard of things like Salesforce.com, for instance? Salesforce.com is what we call software as a service. And there's a lot of it, right? So what other ones might you be using? While some others, geez, I'm just looking at a list here. They're everywhere, really. This Lumen 5 thing, Future Fuel, which is a payment thing. There are a ton of customer relationship management programs, enterprise resource planning, ERP systems, content management systems. You can't name them all because there's so many of them. Well, we have just shut down as a service here for criminals. This guy put something together that has been dubbed the Raccoon Network. And of course, it's sitting over on the dark web. And they had developed a web-based control panel that you could use. So here's the idea. For $200 a month, you, as a criminal customer of his, could get the latest version of the Raccoon Infostealer malware. So all you had to do now is get people to install the malware. So what might you do? Well, you might send out a text message and have someone click on a link and they install something they think they need. The list of those goes on and on, doesn't it? They might send out an email and get you to install it. They might have someone... You might have someone in your company that is a disgruntled employee, and they could go and download this malware and get it installed on a whole bunch of computers, or install it themselves, or let it spread within the network. And what they get then is they get this interaction ability with the infected systems in real time. So they can go to this web-based control crime as a service panel. They can, once they're there, start poking around on your machine, on other machines, uploading files, downloading files, maybe installing ransomware, which is pretty easy to do if you have complete remote control over a computer, which is why managed services providers are big targets and why so many of them are not only targeted, but actually hacked. One of the biggest info breaches that has ever occurred was because one of these providers, one of these service providers for managed services providers wasn't secure. So if they get a hold of you as a managed service services provider or my company, for instance, they now have access to all of my company's customers, right? It gets kind of convoluted pretty quickly. But the idea behind this is get this malware, install it on as many computers as you can, or get people to install it themselves, and then go to the control panel. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these. These web control panels are really quite cool. Well, the passwords and other data that was stolen by this Raccoon malware were also resold to groups that were engaged in deploying ransomware. So really, Raccoon was a remote control panel. That's what it was. So they've been trying to find this guy for a while. 50 million unique credentials stolen is quite a bit. And according to the U.S. Justice Department, the FBI has identified a lot of these stolen criminal materials because they caught this guy. So how did they catch them? And by the way, you'll see this in my newsletter that came out on Monday, or you might have gotten it Wednesday this week. It is really quite something. It's from Krebs on Security. They have a picture of this guy. Now, this is where it starts getting really, really interesting, because here's this guy fleeing Ukraine after the Russian invasion. Now, it's a guy. He's 26 years old, and he is leaving Ukraine. Well, guess why? Well, because there was mandatory military service in Ukraine for 26-year-old young men. He apparently didn't want to go and enlist or, be conscripted. So there is a picture of him here. His name's Mark Sokolovsky, driving what looks to me like a brand new, because it's got the new headlights, Porsche Cayenne. Porsche Cayenne. Now, those aren't really cheap cars. I don't know if you've ever seen them before. You can get them for a pretty good deal on the used market. People really want the new ones. But I had the chance to go have a quick look online. And a 2019 Porsche Cayenne S is the really nice one, good motor, is $64,000. That's a 4-year-old car. And then if you get the high-end one, which is the Turbo GT Coupe, brand new. Well, actually, this is certified pre-owned. I take that back. It's a 2022. Only $210,000. So I want you to picture for just a minute Ukraine. And the pictures you've seen of Ukraine, and just kind of ignoring all of the damage that's occurred because of the war. That is not a very wealthy country. And to see someone like this who is driving, a 26-year-old driving a Porsche Cayenne, would, to me anyways, kind of raise some suspicion. So he managed to get out of Ukraine. And this is from, by the way, a indictment that was unsealed here a couple of weeks back from a U.S. attorney in the Western District of Texas. They're saying he was a core developer for the Raccoon Infostealer business. It's marketed on several Russian-language cybercrime forums beginning in 2019. And many people that had been buying it and had subscribed complained a lot because all of a sudden they said, yeah, due to circumstances, we are no longer able to provide service. And I'm looking at the control panel right now, a screenshot of it. It's really quite nice. I think a guy did quite a good job. $200 a month, and you could make hundreds of thousands of dollars or something like this, right? So Texas, obviously the feds worked with investigators in Italy, the Netherlands. U.S. authorities seized a copy of the server used by Raccoon to help customers manage their botnets. And according to the U.S. Justice Department, they have identified who it was. So he's fled Ukraine. So what did they do? How did they find him? Very, very good questions, right? Well, apparently he made what technically is an operational security mistake. And some of his early posts in the crime forums connected a Gmail account for a cybercrime forum identity that he used called Photix to an Apple iCloud account belonging to him. And that Apple iCloud account, like most of these accounts, if they receive a subpoena, will spill all of the pictures, all of the other stuff that they have. Apple didn't used to be that way, but they have been for a while now if they get a subpoena from a court. So one of these pictures shows him holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 big stacks of cash. Okay. So they had him. They kind of knew where he was. They knew he was living in Kharkiv over there in Ukraine. And they got information from the Polish border guards that he had left. I know I can pronounce that word. And it was a bit of a problem because all able-bodied men of military age were required to report to service to help repel the Russian invasion, or special operation, I should say. And it would have been illegal for him to leave Ukraine without permission, but that wasn't the Polish guards' job, right? The Poles aren't going to enforce Ukrainian law. When we get back, this story gets very, very interesting of how he was tracked down, how he was found. And I'll give you a site you can go to find out if your information was stolen by this kid and what you can do about it. Make sure you visit me online, craigpeterson.com, and look up this story on my newsletter this week. Well, they've shut down another big crime as a service ring. And this particular one was focused around this 26-year-old Ukrainian guy. We're going to talk about how he got caught. Interesting story, and I'll tell you how to see if you were caught in his web. We have this 26-year-old guy fleeing Ukraine. You've seen the pictures of Ukraine. You know a guy, 26 years old, driving a Porsche Cayenne in Ukraine must be corrupt somehow, right? The most corrupt country in Europe, according to many people's evaluation. So he's leaving. He crosses the Polish border. The guards there let him through, but they have a picture of him and someone, who knows who, in the passenger seat. So they were bribed by this kid to let them pass, and so they did. So the authorities tracked his phone through Germany and then to the Netherlands. Now, here's part of the way that they found him. His girlfriend, who was quite cute, I see a picture of them kind of making out here in a square in the Netherlands, and she was taking pictures of them, selfies and others on their trip, kind of the whole way, and posting them to her Instagram account. Isn't that something? So this is Amsterdam's Dam Square is where it's at. I don't know how they pronounce that, Dam or whatever it is. So they knew where they were. They had all of these pictures of the places they were staying. And of course, even if you remove the geolocation codes that are on those pictures, people know some of these areas. And this one was pretty obvious. You can see in the background exactly where they were. So they arrested this kid. This was on March 20th. They arrested him. 2 days later, 2 days after, I should say, the Poles let him pass. So they are moving around pretty good. So on the 25th of March, after he was arrested 5 days later, the accounts that had previously advertised the Raccoon Infostealer malware on these cybercrime forums announced that the service was closing down. And the parting message to their customers said nothing about an arrest and insinuated that the core members in charge of the malware as a service project had perished in the Russian invasion. Yeah, the Ukrainians, they left. And the town that he left from was one of the first towns in that invasion. Unfortunately, due to special operation, we have to close our Raccoon Infostealer project. Okay, so now he is in the hands of these Dutch authorities, and the U.S. applied for him to be extradited, and it has been granted. but he's appealing the decision. He faces 1 count of conspiracy to commit computer fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering, and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. Remember, 50 million people's unique records here, right? So sources told Krebs on Security that he'd been consulting with a Houston, Texas-based attorney, F. and Dino Raynal. Now, if you're kind of wondering, where have I heard that name before? He's the attorney that represented Alex Jones in that recent defamation lawsuit. What was the award on that? I think it was like $1 billion. It's got to be one of the biggest awards ever. And Alex Jones is the InfoWars guy. He has his website. He's got all kinds of theories about things, including, in this case, talking about these kids that were murdered in a school and saying it was all faked, right? And so that's how he lost that case. And $1 billion is, yeah, good luck collecting on that one. But this attorney was responsible for what Jones himself referred to as the Perry Mason moment of the trial, where the plaintiff's lawyer revealed that Raynal had inadvertently given them an entire digital copy of Jones's cell phone. And Mr. Raynal didn't respond to requests for comments here for Krebs. If convicted, Sokolovsky faces a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison for the wire fraud and money laundering offenses, 5 years for the conspiracy to commit computer fraud charge, and a mandatory consecutive 2-year term for the aggravated identity theft offense. So, how do you know if your information was stolen in this? Now, it's important to know if your information was stolen and why, what you can do about it and why it was stolen. So let's talk for a minute here about some of the values. And again, I'm going to refer to it's really kind of cool here, mind map that Krebs had put together, because I think he's got a whole bunch of great stuff. So your PC being hacked is valuable. And also, if you are a business, you're even more valuable, typically because you have more bandwidth and higher powered computers. So they could set up a web server on your hacked PC. There could be a phishing site, could be a malware download site, could be a piracy server, child porn server. I served as a witness here for a guy down in New Jersey who had been sharing files online with one of these torrent sites, and he had been accused by the FBI of having child porn on his computer. Well, if your computer is hacked and they're using it to distribute child porn, should you go to jail over that? Now, he went to jail because he was charged and they arrested him, and he did get out. He was kind of a stalwart in the community, which is why I worked with him. But your hacked computer can be used to distribute child porn. We've also found computers that were hacked that distributed pictures from Al-Qaeda of beheading of Americans and other atrocities, okay? You don't want your computer to get hacked. You can also, they can use your computer for email attacks, webmail spam. They can send out stranded abroad advanced scams. And I had an employee that had that happen, where they got this scam email. Actually, I think for her it was a text saying, "Hey, I'm stuck abroad and I need to make bail. You need to send me money right away." And so my employee thought, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm just going to give her a call." Gave her a call, and she was fine. She wasn't overseas at all. And she was kind of chuckling about, "Wow, that's weird, because that ain't me." So access to corporate emails, another thing, harvesting accounts, email contacts, virtual goods could be sold through your site, right? The dark web can run on your computer in your business or in your home. They can put it on there. It's easy enough to do. Just put it on the Onion network. Bot activity. It goes on, right? And maybe we should focus in on that at some point. And then your email account, again, it's worth a lot of money. Privacy, all of your messages, calendar, chats, photos, call records. You can use it for retail resale. Things like Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Macy's, Amazon. Think of all of the stores you've bought from. Financial, your bank accounts are on there. This goes on and on. So he had a very valuable company, and your information may well have been stolen. So what I want you to do is get a pencil out, because I'm going to give you a website that you can go to, or get ready to type this into your computer. And what you do when you get there, this is run by the U.S. Justice Department. And when you get there, it's going to ask for your email address. Now, I sent this out as well in my email this week, so you should have received it. There's a direct link to this site. But you put in your email address, and it will tell you if you were part of the Raccoon Infostealer data. It's raccoon.ic3.gov. raccoon.ic3.gov. And if you're a victim of any sort of cybercrime, go to ic3.gov and report it. They might not do anything specifically for you, but it does help them track it down. raccoon.ic3.gov. This ruling is going to affect every business in the country. It doesn't matter how small they are or how big they are. This is absolutely huge, and I'm going to explain it to you right now. Cybersecurity is really important. I talk about it all of the time. I have my website, craigpeterson.com, that has a ton of information on it. And this is what I do for my clients, for business and government agencies all across the world for decades now. I hate to admit that in some ways, but I'm proud of it too, because I know what I'm talking about, because I've had so much experience. Well, this is a story about a ruling. It's in the New York Times. Yes, indeed. They sometimes do accidental journalism. And it's a fascinating story for every person in business. Now, I'm talking about business owners, but I'm also talking about just employees, because this could put your business out of business in a very, very big way. And this is a story about Joe Sullivan. He was a security chief over at a company called Uber. And of course, you probably know Uber is one of these ride-sharing type companies. But he was found guilty early October by a jury in federal court on charges that he did not disclose a breach of customer and driver records to government regulators. I talked about this years ago when we first found out about the breach. So you might remember this, might ring a bell to you. But in 2016, the Federal Trade Commission was investigating Uber over an earlier breach of its online systems. And Mr. Sullivan, the security guy at Uber, learned of a new breach that affected the accounts of more than 57 million people. Now, the jury found him guilty on one count of obstructing the FTC's investigation and one count of misprision, I guess is how you might pronounce that, or acting to conceal a felon from authorities. So this is believed to be the first time a company executive faced criminal prosecution over a hack. And it really could change how security professionals are handling data breaches. It's really interesting to consider this, frankly. So here's a quote from some security and law professors and lecturers at a few different law schools, but saying the way responsibilities are divided up is going to be impacted by this. What's documented is going to be impacted by this. The way bug bounty programs are designed is going to be impacted by this. Now, that last part is where Sullivan really got himself in trouble, and that's bug bounties. I don't know if you've heard of these before, but the idea is every computer has a bug. That's always been true. It will always be true. Some of the bugs are pretty bad, and some of them aren't so bad. That's why you have to patch. Now, of course, just turning on auto updates on your Mac or auto updates on your Windows computer does not patch everything that needs to be patched, but that's a different story for another day. So the way bug bounty programs are set up is they want to encourage what are called white hat hackers to tell them about bugs that they find. So if you've got somebody that knows about a bug and they come to you and say, hey, here's a bug, it's going to allow people to take over any Mac, any iOS, any Android, any Windows, whatever it might be, or maybe even just a specific piece of software. And what's it worth to you to find out about it? So in other words, in the bug bounty programs, people get paid for finding the bugs and reporting the bugs. Now, they actually don't even have to find it. They just have to report it, right? It might be somebody else who found it. And they get paid once they reveal what the bug is. It's kind of an interesting dance, because what could happen is they say, well, I got this bug and it's going to end the world tomorrow. And the company they reported to is going to say, yeah, sure, show it to me. So then the guy has to show them the bug and how easy it is to do, whether it can be exploited out in the wild easily by people, and whether it's a remote execution bug, right? All of these different things that have to be considered. And then the company will decide how much they're going to pay. In this case, apparently what had happened, well, what happened, because the jury decided this, right? But they found that a hacker and an accomplice had downloaded the personal data of about 600,000 Uber drivers and additional personal information about 57 million riders and drivers, I should say. So that's according to the court testimony and documents. So the hackers wanted to get paid. So this was a ransom, right? This was the second form of ransomware, if you will, that we see today, where the first form was, I'm going to encrypt all your files, pay me to be able to decrypt them. And the second form was, I'm going to suck all the files off of your computers. Then I'm going to encrypt them and hold them ransom. And if you don't pay me to decrypt them, I'm going to release them and embarrass the company, embarrass you, whatever might end up happening, right? The consequences. So it's kind of a double whammy. In this case, the hacker said, hey, pay us at least $100,000 or we're going to release all of this information. Interesting. So now Uber's faced with the question, at that point in time, do we comply? What do we do here about all of this? And so the security guy decided, okay, well, maybe we can use the bug bounty program. We can claim that, oh, these guys discovered a bug in our systems, so we have money set aside for bug bounties, and we'll just pay them from that. But the bug bounty program capped payouts at $10,000, according to the court testimony documents. But Mr. Sullivan and his team paid the hackers $100,000, and the CEO apparently was in on it as well. Now, that's kind of interesting too, isn't it? They had the hackers sign a non-disclosure agreement. And the hackers admitted under testimony they were trying to extort money from Uber. And here's the second problem. Uber did not publicly disclose the incident or inform the FTC until the new chief executive joined the company in 2017. The two hackers pled guilty to the hack back in October 2019. Now, most states require companies to disclose breaches if hackers download personal data. And there's usually a ceiling or a floor, if you will, that there a certain number of users are affected or certain type of information is revealed, right? There's no federal law that's requiring companies or executives to reveal the breaches to the regulators, but there are state laws. Pretty much every state now has a law. Some of them are tougher than others, but the Northeast, all of the states definitely have these laws. California, the states you kind of expect to have them. And the federal prosecutors argued that Mr. Sullivan knew that revealing the new hack would extend the FTC investigation and hurt his reputation, and that he concealed the hack from the FTC. So this does not have to be a public company. You don't have to be a public company to have these laws affect you. If you are hacked, you need to report it, right? You are mandated to report it to the state. Personally, I would report it to the feds. I would use the ic3.gov website, and I would probably call up the FBI if that's what my client wanted to do. Hey, make sure you go online, sign up for my newsletter, get this and everything else I talk about on the air, CraigPeterson.com. We got a couple of good articles here we'll discuss from We Live Security. The first one is about Airbnb and spy cameras that might be in that room and hacking baby monitors. It's a big deal. You'll find in this week's newsletter a couple of articles with links over to welivesecurity.com. And the reason those are both there is because it has to do with the bad guys spying on you the old-fashioned way with cameras and microphones. Yeah, interesting, because it's still happening. First of all here, we're going to talk about Airbnb. So in recent years, we've had some travelers who have reported that they were being filmed by covert cameras in rental properties. Now, this isn't just Airbnb. There are others out there. And for those that aren't familiar with it, Airbnb is a website that you can go and you can rent out your house or your condo or your apartment to strangers, perfect strangers. And then they can rent them. And I've used Airbnb a few times, and I've been very disappointed with it more than once, which is kind of a shame, frankly. But anyways, if you have one of these properties that you want to rent out, you want to make sure that it's reasonably secure. Airbnb has gone so far as to disallow using one of the rental properties for having a party. Why? Well, because some of these properties have been destroyed by partiers. So what are you to do? Well, security cameras and noise monitoring devices are allowed by Airbnb. Quote, as long as they're clearly disclosed in the listing description and don't infringe on another person's privacy. So there, it's pretty obvious that you probably don't want to be doing something that you shouldn't be doing, or maybe you don't want filmed in one of the more public areas. So I'm thinking that's like the living room, the kitchen, outside the property, right? And outside the property, okay, I expect there to be security cameras. I have security cameras everywhere around my house. But how about inside? And that's where people have had their dream vacations ruined because they found this creepy little camera. You might be familiar with some of them. They've certainly been in movies and TV shows. Things like your bear, a teddy bear sitting on a shelf. That eye might be a camera. You can buy a smoke detector that has a camera built right in. Those sorts of things aren't just from spy movies anymore, right? It isn't what the Soviets did and we did back to them. This is something anybody can go online and buy. And that's a bit of a problem. So if I go right now, so I'm going to go and look for babysitter camera, hidden camera, with audio. Right here on Amazon.com. And guess what I have? A whole bunch of them. Oh, 2K. That's pretty fancy. Yeah, two-way audio. This is the sort of thing you might use for a baby monitor. Here's some other ones. Here's one built right into a clock. 1080p, so that's HD, that's high def video there for $69.99. Here it is. I mentioned this to you. A hidden camera smoke detector. Wi-Fi spy camera. Hidden cameras. Security nanny cams. Not very good ratings on that one. And then Amazon even has a whole list of highly rated. It goes on and on. Here's a cute little one. It looks like a little robot, but it doesn't move apparently. Security cone. Oh, here's one. This is a, I haven't seen this before. This is a USB power plug, you know, that you plug in and then to the wall, and then you plug your USB power into it. And built right into it is a spy camera. They even called it a spy camera. Here's another one. I've never seen that type before. Here's a really small one, a DIY module. Okay, it goes on and on. I'm not going to bore you with these all. I think they're actually pretty cool, frankly. Here's one built into a pen. One that's smaller than your fingernail. Wow. 13 pages worth of them over on Amazon. So they are definitely available. But what do you do? Because it can be really hard to spot these things. And they're designed to be hard to spot. It's intended that they're hard to spot. Well, here you go. It was in this week's newsletter. Hopefully you got that. You can sign up at craigpeterson.com. You'll get all of this stuff, right? I'm not pounding you with marketing messages like some other people who are marketers, primarily marketers. I'm primarily a security guy. And my wife says we should be selling a bunch of stuff, but, you know, what am I going to do? I have some things, but I deal with businesses for the most part. So here's what you can do. Go to either the website that this article appears on. Of course, it doesn't have my commentary, but welivesecurity.com. They got a bunch of good stuff. But here's the list that they have. Physically check the room. So you want to look for cameras that are hiding in plain sight. They might be in the clocks, like I mentioned. They might be in smoke detectors, like I mentioned. They could be in speakers or even in light bulbs. Use a flashlight. Now, this is a very good trick. And I kind of learned this one with my wife because she had a really bad retina tear and had surgery to repair it, and she got like almost 100% back of her sight. It was amazing, particularly considering it was a tear and not just a detachment. Anyhow, she ended up having to have her lens replaced in her eye. So they replaced it with a glass lens. And so now in certain light conditions, it looks like she has cat's eyes or dogs, right? Where they reflect back at you. Deer, right? All these illegal hunters go out in spotlight to find deer at night along the side of the road. Completely illegal. So, but I can do it to find my wife, just spotlight, and there she is. But these camera lenses are also made of glass, just like her eye has glass in it right there for her lens. That means they are reflective. So turn off the lights in your Airbnb or even your hotel room, whatever you're renting, and shine a flashlight around. Particularly shine it at things that are interesting, like we had mentioned, right? The fire detector, the things plugged into the wall, teddy bears, all of these different types of security devices or devices that might have security in them. And if you see it shine back at you, kind of like, again, like your pet's eyes at night, then you need to take a closer look at it. If it is in a private area, so in other words, if it's in a bathroom or in a bedroom that should be obviously private, or you find it anywhere in the property and it was not clearly disclosed in the rental site, you know, Uber or wherever you got it from, it has to be clearly disclosed, then you need to do two things. One, report it to the rental company. Let them know what you found. They might want you to send some pictures. And number two, if you are particularly upset, call the police. because that's illegal. People get arrested for this sort of thing all of the time. And there's no reason that you should have to put up with it. Okay, so there's a few things you can do, but those are probably your best. Also, if the lights are out or down and you notice a red light or perhaps a green light, these may well be infrared lights, ultraviolet lights that are trying to light up the area. Now, you might not see them very brightly, but you will see them. And that could be a telltale sign right there. So there's some pretty fancy mobile applications being developed. You can look for those. Time of flight is one of them, these sensors to find spy cams. You can also potentially detect RF signals. You could do a scan of the Wi-Fi network to see what other devices are on that network. That's usually a pretty easy thing to do. Those apps are free for your smartphones and for your laptops. Just scan the network and see what is attached to the network. That might tell you something right there. So that's what I would do. First of all, I just do that scan, right? You can also, if you're really trying to be thorough, I have an advanced class ham radio license, so I've got frequency detectors and frequency counters and things, so I can check and find out what's where. But just scanning Wi-Fi is probably good enough, and using the flashlight. Now, baby monitors. Another article from WeLiveSecurity.com. Where parents are opening the door to the baby's bedroom because they hear something coming from there, and they find a stranger talking to their baby through the monitor. Now, in both these cases, where we're talking about the rental property or we're talking about baby monitors, it's actually fairly rare that either one of these things happens. So I don't want you to totally freak out. But they can happen, and there's things you can do. I told you what to do here about the spy cameras. Here's what you do about the baby monitors. First of all, make sure you research it thoroughly. You want to use a manufacturer that places a strong emphasis on security, and obviously one that has really good reviews. Okay, makes sense? Make sure, once you get it, that you update the device's firmware. That's important. So when you're buying it, make sure that the firmware can be updated. Does that make sense? And also make sure you're using strong and unique passwords, usernames, two-factor authentication if you can, and use also don't use a service that requires you to mess around with your firewall. It's called port forwarding or UPnP, because that alone is extremely dangerous and can give someone on the outside direct access to your baby monitor or your security cameras. Hey, make sure you sign up. CraigPeterson.com. You'll get my weekly newsletter, the free one, with all kinds of great insider show notes. Okay, this is a big one. Can your iPhone be hacked? Well, if it has a wire, it can be hacked. Okay, so we're going to talk about how it can be hacked. What are the things you can do to stop your smartphone from getting hacked? We've had a lot of comments about this article that I sent out in my newsletter on Monday, the Monday newsletter, the free one, my insider show notes at CraigPeterson.com. And WeLiveSecurity.com had this. Andre Lemarius is the author of this, and he was asking the question about your iPhone. Now, we know that iPhones tend to be more secure than Android phones. In fact, they tend to be a whole lot more secure. So how secure are they? And I got to say, most of these problems with iPhones that we're going to discuss have to do with you and I not treating them securely. Is that a surprise or not, right? Apple has, from the very beginning, designed the Apple operating system around the principles of least access. And I think that's a very, very good thing to do, frankly, when you get right down to it. Because the whole concept of least access means that you can and will be able to just get on and do what you need to do, but nothing else, right? So Apple's operating system, it has a whole bunch of roots, but they've kept this in mind. Now compare that to our friends at Microsoft, for instance. Microsoft took the Internet Protocol code and shoehorned it into Windows, which is part of the reason Windows has been so terrible. The other part is, well, there's a lot of reasons, so I won't go into them all now. But Unix was designed in the university environment. Well, initially, of course, at AT&T, Bell Labs, they wanted to run on everything, so there was some security in there. And then once it hit UC Berkeley, all of a sudden you had all these kids trying to break into it, and it had all of this wonderful networking stuff. They explored a bunch of protocols. Unix, man, back in that day, it was so great to be working on this stuff. It was so cool. And then we moved forward, and it did get adopted in the form of FreeBSD. And frankly, there's a microkernel underneath all of this whole thing with Apple, which is also an amazing thing that really Apple hasn't taken full advantage of. And then Apple introduced the isolation of processes, further isolation. Of course, they're isolated in Unix to begin with, unlike MS-DOS or earlier versions of Windows. And once they're isolated, ta-da, we're getting a lot safer. And then they introduced the concept of, well, let's have code signatures, let's use public keys and private keys in order to have developers sign them, and then we'll have software analyze everything that's put into the App Store, so we know that it's probably safe, if not absolutely safe. They've done a whole lot of stuff, right? So that's the iPhone. Android was written by a few guys in a garage. You know, of course, that's kind of how Apple started, right? A few guys in a garage. But Google came along and bought it and ran with it and has been adding a lot of features. They kind of did the Microsoft thing, right? Let's add features. Who cares if they're secure, if they work or not? Microsoft has changed its attitude lately, and Google has as well. Google's been trying to make things safer, no question. By the way, if you have a Pixel, what was it? They just announced, I think it was the Pixel 4 phone. It only had 3 years of support. Ta-da! They're completely bricking those phones now going forward. No more updates for you. So people who bought the Pixel thinking, yeah, well, Google's going to support it. It's going to be a good thing. Surprise, surprise. Back to the iPhone now. The most dangerous things you can do on your Android phone and your iPhone is to hack them, to root them. There's a lot of different words people use to describe what they do so they can get around the restrictions that the operating system has put in place. And those restrictions are in there for very, very good reasons, no matter the operating system. And if you are rooting your phones, particularly iPhones, you can do what's called side-loading apps. Now, in the Google space, it's pretty easy to side-load apps. In the iOS space, not so easy, at least not to be able to have an app that runs natively right on top of the operating system. There are ways to install an app that can run other apps, and that's a little less dangerous than having them directly on the phone. So why is a side-loaded app more dangerous? Well, because it does not have the oversight of the Google Play Store or the oversight of the Apple App Store, which does have oversight, which does try and get the software out into people's hands, right? It does a whole lot of things. And one of the biggest complaints about iOS is how slow it's been in adopting new features. I've talked about security features, and iOS has been way ahead of Android devices for years, but Android's been ahead in other features. So in order to overcome some of these so-called deficiencies, things where they might want to customize more on the home screen or add some other whiz-bangs here or there, they have something called sideloading. They jailbreak their phone. Okay, that's another word for rooting your phone. So don't do that. Anybody, please don't do that. It's a very, very bad idea. However, the European Union, of course, they have infinite wisdom. It is a very large government there in Brussels that runs the whole EU. They're about the size of the United States now when it comes to their population. The EU has said, Apple, we need you to allow side-loaded apps on the iPhone. And of course, Apple's been pushing back, saying, hey, we don't want apps on the iPhone that aren't part of our app store. And to that, the EU and developers respond saying, well, yeah, you guys, all you're trying to do is rip us off and make money and charge 30% on every app that we sell just to be on your store. Well, okay, I can see both sides of that argument. Apple built the infrastructure. Apple became the biggest one out there. It isn't as though it just happened magically. And because that magic wand smiled at Apple now and didn't smile on someone else, Apple really needs to kind of step down from that throne. We're not going to get into that right now. That can get into some religious wars, okay? But content from the Apple's App Store has various limitations placed on it. And that's one of them is downloading these widgets and other things from third-party stores. Sideloading, which is getting an app from an unofficial store, can also be done by downloading it directly through a website on Safari or other browsers. Kind of depends on how the code is written and what it needs to do. So we're not going to get into the debate of whether or not that you should be able to put them on. I like the idea of why can't I put whatever I want on my computer, on my phone, etc. I can see that, guys. I get that. On the other side of that is I'm not going to do that because it's dangerous. So that's one of the big problems. Fake apps in the App Store is another thing. So don't sideload. And fake apps, that's out of your control, really. You need to pay close attention to what you're doing. And the Apple official App Store is generally known to provide you with safe content, safe apps, right? And it goes through or has gone through a process looking for bugs, privacy policy concerns, they ID third-party ad providers, licensing requirements, a whole bunch of stuff, right? Apple's doing a decent job there. But sometimes something slips through. One of the things that comes to my mind, which has been the biggest thing ever, was these wallpapers people were downloading for Android. And I remember my first Android phone, I had downloaded one of these wallpapers and then did some more investigation, looked at it, and the wallpapers were stealing the contacts. They were stealing information from the phone from a wallpaper. Now, some of that hasn't happened on the iPhone, no doubt about that. But you can even go to a website on your iPhone or your Android, and that website can have JavaScript, which is a programming language, running things like miners, Bitcoin mining, etc. So if your battery dies faster than you think it should, or if your phone is getting hot, you might well have some evil software on your computer, okay? Fake antivirus, that's a very, very big one. A friend of mine keeps downloading this so-called antivirus for his Mac, which isn't an antivirus, which is really a problem. It's spyware, and he pays for it, okay? That's what I don't get. So here you go. Here's another one. Another fake antivirus found on Apple's App Store was charging $150 for 3 months to remove non-existent viruses. Because, of course, there's viruses, right? People are used to that from the Microsoft side. And viruses can get onto anything. Ultimately, we all know that. So what do? They sell fake antivirus software. So this thing claimed to detect over 100 viruses and charged $150 for 3 months to so-called remove them. Now, be careful with calendars, by the way, because the calendar app kind of seems like it's probably pretty safe, but it's one of the most common ways to distribute malware on your iOS device. Isn't that something? So hackers can send you invites. They come from leaked email addresses or from you after you've unintentionally subscribed to calendar events on dodgy websites. So don't subscribe to calendar events on websites that you cannot absolutely trust. That's that simple. Make sure you get this article and more in the weeks to come. CraigPeterson.com. Sign up right there. You know those text messages that you get that come out of the blue from someone that you don't know and you have no idea why they're sending you anything? Well, those might be smishing messages, and the IRS has issued a big warning about them. You probably know what phishing is, right? Phishing is where someone sits in a boat all day long and tries to catch a fish. It's not called catching, it's called fishing, because you never know if you will catch something, and sometimes you don't even know what you might catch. Well, there's the phishing for the industrial world, for the internet. There you go. And this type of phishing is spelled phishing, and it's kind of similar. Typically, with a phishing attack, what will happen is they will send out emails to thousands or millions of people in hopes that enough people respond to make it worth their while. So they'll try and trick them into doing something, sending a message, going to a website, downloading malware, whatever it might be. So that's called phishing. There's vishing, which is voice phishing, where they'll make phone calls, usually pretending to be tech support or HR or someone else. And then there's smishing as well. Yeah, there's a lot of these out there. And smishing is where you are sent a text message, an SMS message, and they expect you to respond. And so the SMS message, again, might be trying to get you to click on a link. It might be trying to get you to respond, in fact, to that message or make a phone call by clicking on the message. Or there's a lot of things that they try and get you to do. Well, we have, from Info Security Magazine, a warning that the IRS came out with. They're warning taxpayers of an exponential increase in text-based phishing attempts. And they're urging users to report these campaigns to the IRS to help the government stop them, or at least disrupt them, right? So, good all the way around. So far, so good. Well, in a news alert yesterday, this is yesterday in the article, the tax agency said it had identified thousands of fake domains so far in 2022, which are used to facilitate the so-called smishing scams. Now, these websites are designed to steal your personal and financial information. And one of the, nowadays anyways, the best indicators of whether or not a site is legitimate is its age. There are millions and millions of websites, web domains out there, and those sites that only came online within the last couple of months, those are suspect. So if you are trying to get a business going online and you registered a domain and you're setting it up and everything's looking good for you, but you're not getting visitors, and in fact, sometimes people try and click on the link on your email to go to your website and they can't get there, or the link has been flagged. It's because of these bad guys. They register a domain, they within a month or two use that domain by trying to get people to go there from either these phishing emails or, in this case, smishing surge. In fact, this is so big, the IRS is calling it an industrial scale smishing surge. Try and say that fast. So it spoofed messages appearing like they're from the IRS. They often use lures like fake COVID relief, tax credits. Man, there was a lot during the lockdown, a lot of these fake COVID things. Tax credits, help setting up an IRS online account. They might request personal information. They might covertly download malware to your device by tricking you into clicking on a malicious link. Sound familiar? So this is phishing on an industrial scale, so thousands of people can be at risk of receiving these scam messages. That's according to the IRS Commissioner Kamish. In recent months, he said, the IRS has reported multiple large-scale smishing campaigns that have delivered thousands and even hundreds of thousands of IRS-themed messages in hours or a few days, far exceeding previous levels of activity. Automated toolings helping to drive the surge. IRS claimed that just 36 stolen or bogus email addresses were used to create over 1,000 fraudulent domains for a recent smishing campaign. And they're urging us and tax professionals to keep reporting these smishing attempts that you're discovering. So what they want you to do, if you get a text message that's impersonating the IRS isn't going around sending out random text messages, guys, okay? So if you get one of these, they say, send an email to phishing, which is, of course, phishing, at irs.gov. Copy in the caller ID number or the email address that the message was sent from. Paste that number or address, obviously, into the email. And they're really, this is something else. They're telling you exactly how to do it. Press and hold the SMS/text message and select copy. And then paste it in. Include the exact time, date, time zone, telephone number that received the message, if you dare, and send it again. It's phishing at irs.gov. Expect a lot of that this year. It's interesting looking at statistics that really the frauds go up during a downturn in the economy. And I guess that makes sense, right? They're trying to make more money, or at least keep their monetary income just continuing to increase, even though things are down overall. So crypto scams are also soaring. And remember I mentioned the domains, how the bad guys are registering them and then using them almost immediately? Well, InfoSecurity Magazine has an article talking about this, saying that the number of domains have surged 335%. That's registrations, by the way, not overall domains. But their Group IB, which is a cybersecurity company, said it had detected over 2,000 domains registered to be used as fake promotion websites in the first half of this year. Isn't that something? That's a 335% increase on the number recorded last year. Five-fold increase compared to the second half of 2021, and 53-fold rise in comparison with the first half of 2021. That's something. So most of the fake sites are targeting English and Spanish speakers. 63% of the fake sites were registered with Russian registrars. Now that's interesting too. That kind of leads you to believe that these guys are operating out of Russia. And victims are being lured to these sites here for the crypto scams via fraudulent YouTube streams featuring popular figures like Elon Musk and Brad Garlinghouse, this footballer over in Europe. If you follow that at all, you might know Cristiano Ronaldo, and even El Salvador President Nayib Bukele, which is, by the way, El Salvador, they've adopted Bitcoin as their official national currency. So be careful, right? If you're seeing some of these videos, they are scams trying to get you to go to a website, invest in crypto. We've all heard how great crypto is. Crypto has not been doing well lately, and you've got to be very, very careful. By the way, these scammers, according to, again, Group IB, said that one group of fraudsters managed to make nearly $1.7 million in just 3 days after luring victims to fake sites via 36 YouTube streams. Yeah, isn't that something? Absolutely crazy. Hopefully you got these this week. Both of these articles, the one from this info security stuff, is in the newsletter that went out Monday. Don't miss next week's or any week following. Go to craigpeterson.com and subscribe while you're there. craigpeterson.com/subscribe. A word of warning here for businesses. You know, if you have computers and you're done with them, what do you do with them next? You know, the federal government has huge shredders that'll shred the whole machine, but how about you? Well, clients come first, don't they? In fact, that's what it says. The opening sentence of its main page. Clients come first. Morgan Stanley. It bills itself as the global leader in financial services. And man, do they really take care of your information. It's just, you know, your PII, your personally identifiable information. Man, could you ask for more than what Morgan Stanley provides? Well, it turns out you can. Because Morgan Stanley has been fined $35 million by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, I know to Morgan Stanley, $35 million isn't even really a rounding error. To you and me, you know, that's good money. I wouldn't mind having $35 million. I'd retire instantly, right? Who wouldn't? But it still brings home a point for every last one of us. We've had clients that have been at the point where they have to get rid of old equipment. And some of them just have, you know, dumped them. Others have given them to schools as a bit of a tax write-off. It's interesting for me to analyze the clients that did that and how they did it. But what should you do if you are a home user, if you are a business user? Well, I can tell you what we do for DoD contracts, and we'll work our way down. But for the Department of Defense contractors, we actually have a kiln that's designed to melt down hard disk platters. And we have these ingots, for lack of a better term, of aluminum from the platters. Now, some disks have glass platters. Those are easy enough to destroy. But if you melt them down, there is no recovering any of that data. Now, if you're a regular business, you can do a few different things. For instance, I have a drill press. And on that drill press, I have a metal bit, a nice big one. And what you can do to reasonably destroy that disk is to put it on the drill press. Of course, take all safety precautions, including wearing eye covering, and drill 3 big holes in that, just a few inches out from the center of the disk platter. And that will destroy it quite well. Not as good as what the Department of Defense wants, can't blame them, because there's still some data that's on there. But you'd really, really have to want that data in order to try and recover anything. And you would only be able to recover some various parts of it. That's why we melt down the disks, the platters, for some of our clients that have information that needs to be kept a little bit more private. Now, the next level, by the way, you can do the drill press trick with SSDs as well as with spinning disks. SSDs, you've got to really demolish the heck out of that drive. But just destroy it. Some people, well, Hillary Clinton, right? When she had their smart devices subpoenaed, how did she destroy them? You know, it was only a subpoena for a court order, you know, so of course you destroy them. Well, she used a ball-peen hammer and used that hammer to just beat the living daylights out of it. And once that was done, ta-da, we're done, and there's nothing left that's of any use. So you can use a hammer on a hard disk. I wouldn't say so much. On a smartphone, another small electronics device, it would be very effective. Again, safety precautions, everybody. You don't want to hurt yourself as you're doing this. And for things like thumb drives, USB thumb drives, just take a hammer to it. It doesn't have to be a ball-peen hammer. You don't have to follow Hillary Clinton's lead. Maybe that's why she wasn't prosecuted for destroying evidence that was under subpoena. I don't know. But that's an easy way to destroy some of the smaller devices. Now, what if you have, sensitive information on a computer, but it's not like the end of the world? Well, what I have done is I've gone online. There are a couple of different ways to do this. What I've preferred to do is download some software, very simple software. It runs a Linux operating system. Not that you need to know that, because you just download it, you put it on a thumb drive, or maybe burn it to a CD. Who does that anymore? And put it in the machine, boot it up. It only takes seconds to boot up, and then it gives you a little menu. What do you want to do? Just a basic wipe of the drives, or do you want to go crazy and use the DoD standard wipe? And that can run for some hours, depending on how much space is available on that drive. And it's a very, very good thing to do, because at that point now, there's nothing left on the machine at all, nothing readable. It has done multiple passes, writing random data, zeros and ones, so it's unrecoverable. That's for sure. Maybe, the FSB or the CIA, NSA has some ways to get at it, but I really kind of doubt it. And then on that computer, if it's a Windows computer, it's going to have a license, so you can reinstall Windows using that license. If it's a Mac, you can easily just reinstall the Mac OS. No problem there. You don't need a license number or anything like you do with Windows. And off it will go. And then you can donate that to your favorite charity, or just give it to someone in need, which is what I have done forever. Give it to somebody who really could use the computer. Kids nowadays need the computers for school. People need the computers for working from home. And just because it isn't meeting your needs anymore in the business doesn't mean it won't meet their needs. Then, of course, the other thing they can do once they have got that computer in the hot little hands is they can buy a new disk for it. I have a Mac 5K, in fact, in front of me right now, and it was a little slow, getting a little sluggish, and I reinstalled just to see if there was some garbage kind of sitting around, and that didn't really help because I was comparing it with these other newer, faster computers. So what I did is I pulled out the Fusion drive that was in there, which Apple had for, I don't know, a little year or more. And that is something to kind of speed things up and keep the costs down. So it's like an SSD and a spinning disk all in one basic unit. And I replaced those with solid state drives. And I replaced one of them, the unit that was part of the Fusion drive that was the high speed part. I replaced that with a very high speed, kind of one of those thumbstick drives that you can buy nowadays. So that machine is quite fast now, plenty fast enough. And then I found online a company that sells old computers that are damaged and things. So I bought a damaged 5K that was a better computer than what I had, because I had kind of a low-end one, and I replaced the whole motherboard inside, and man, is it a lot faster, a lot more CPUs and everything. So there's ways to upgrade them. But why, you might ask, did Morgan Stanley Smith Barney get fined $35 million? Well, here's the bottom line. They had apparently been selling off devices full of customers' personal identifiable information. If you want this article and more, craigpeterson.com. Make sure you sign up right now, especially if you're a business. So they were selling these things off. Interesting, no? Well, I want to warn everybody that you should be doing what I just described. It is so important to keep your personal information safe, to keep your business information safe. And if you have any medical records, this is required by law. There's jail time. And if you have any contracts with the Department of Defense, that's true too. But I don't want you to just think about the computers or the servers when it comes to destroying the data. Remember, photocopiers nowadays are printers, and they have hard disks in them. So they load your print job onto the hard disk. They load that scan when you're making a copy onto the hard disk. You got to destroy those too. Man, don't get fined and don't get your business taken from you. From Virginia to California to France to Japan and beyond, nuclear power is all the rage again. Wow, wait a minute. We need reliable electricity? What's going on here? This is no surprise, I don't think, to anybody who thinks at all, let alone thinks for a living. It was in this week's newsletter. You should have received it on Monday. But it's from FEE Stories online, and it's talking about nuclear power. Now, the governor of Virginia, I was just told this last week, has now ordered one of these new nuclear plants. He must be listening to the show, because for a couple of years I've been suggesting this, and we talked about the newest generation of nuclear technology very, very recently. And what he has said is, hey, listen, we need nuclear. Now, these new nuclear plants are small. They are made in a factory. We're not talking about having to have custom-built power plants like we've had for years in nuclear. And they are intrinsically safe. It doesn't need electricity to run, like what happened in Fukushima, 3 Mile Island. If you lose your power grid, it doesn't matter. If the pumps stop, it doesn't matter. It is all self-contained. It's shipped on trucks, and it uses basic physics to make sure it is intrinsically safe. So why wouldn't you do that? Well, Governor Gavin Newsom, he was spearheading this 11th hour effort to pass legislation to extend a lifeline to Diablo Canyon. This is a massive nuclear power plant, 2,200 megawatts. It supplies some 8% of the energy produced in California. Isn't that something? Under pressure from lawmakers, environmental activists, the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, PG&E, who's been fined multiple times by California for rolling blackouts and other things, fires among them, agreed in 2016 to decommission Diablo when its operating licenses expire in 2024 and 2025. But in light of the recent energy policy environment, you know, the one where President Biden, day one, cut our sources of natural gas and oil, and I can't believe the stuff he's saying now. It's just so, it's incredulous. But yeah, we need electricity. So now California lawmakers are kind of having some second thoughts. European lawmakers are having second thoughts. They are bringing nuclear power plants back online, the old designs that are sitting there. And they're also now saying that nuclear power is green. Yeah, now I don't know what AOC has to say, because, of course, she is the standard by which all things are measured. But they're saying it's green. And I agree. I absolutely agree. You know, when you consider the risks and the deaths and the injuries from all of these other types of power, man, there is no comparison how safe nuclear is. It's kind of like driving your car versus flying in a plane. And based on the number of miles that you're traveling, how safe is it? Planes are just incredibly safe. Same thing with nuclear power and these new fourth generation plants. Wow, very, very safe. So that's going to be very interesting. Now, when Newsom was running for governor, and of course, we're all expecting him to run for president next cycle. This was back in 2016. He said, I don't see that this plant is going to survive beyond 2024 and 2025. I just don't see that. And there is a compelling argument as to why it shouldn't, he said. So now he's being kind of quiet about it, and he's encouraging the legislature to go ahead and let's extend Diablo Canyon's operating license. Belgium, one of several European countries, it's extending, it's set to expire licenses to keep nuclear plants operational. Belgium's a small country. France, a very large country, as our vice president might describe it, has proposed building up to 14 new nuclear plants in the coming years. Japan, which shuttered nuclear reactors after the 2011 Fukushima crisis, and that was entirely brought on by themselves. They did not follow the engineer's instructions on building that plant, where to build that plant, and where to build the backup power. Okay, so it's an older generation power plant, by the way, designed in the United States, and they messed it up, and they refused to take any, the people who messed it up, take any responsibility for it. It's crazy. But Japan wants to restart up to 9 reactors. The UK, Poland, the Czech Republic, they are all putting plans in place to build new nuclear reactors. So nuclear power is suddenly the in thing nowadays, right? Natural gas prices have skyrocketed. States like New Hampshire that burn natural gas to create electricity. Can't believe New Hampshire shut down so many of those plants. Massachusetts, Vermont, everybody. What's the matter with you people? Anyways, yeah. So they are New Hampshire. Their electric price doubled in when was it? September 2022 in New Hampshire, because they're burning natural gas. But that's nothing compared to Europe. They recently hit an all-time high, the equivalent of $600 per barrel oil prices. Businesses are reporting a 5-fold year-over-year price increase. 5-fold. Could you survive that? 500%? So Europe's in the middle of a full-blown energy crisis, no small part because they pursued this fake green energy agenda. And I say fake because it's not green. All it does is move the pollution somewhere else. It moves the risk somewhere else. It moves the lives lost somewhere else. But it shifted from domestic production, especially when we're talking about fossil fuels and nuclear power, and went to this reliance on natural gas imports from Russia. Now, we had pipelines. We had power lines coming down from Canada. In the Northeast, we were counting on this huge DC power line coming down from Hydro-Quebec. No, we can't have that. We can't have that. Not in my backyard. No, we can't have windmills. Not off the Cape. No, not in my backyard. Right? So the situation in California is obviously different than in Europe. But there's also a clear reason that California is second-guessing its decision to shut down its single largest power station. The reason? Its energy grid is in terrible shape. They've had rolling blackouts. They managed to survive the summer without a whole lot of rolling blackouts. They encouraged people to not charge their electric cars. They set thermostats at 78 degrees or higher. Don't use large appliances. Turn off unnecessary lights. In Colorado, they used these new smart thermostats that we have in our homes. Yeah, in Colorado, they used those to reset your air conditioning during the summertime. Doesn't matter what you set it at. No. The government is going to cut it back here because you're a horrible, horrible waster of electricity. It's terrible. So California is seen as green energy success stories, and in some ways it is. They've had solar panel encouraged on roofs for more than 20 years. Of course, now the chickens are come home to roost, as they say, as 10% of all of those toxic solar panels that are being removed from the roofs because they're no longer effective, they're broken down, they're going into landfills and they're polluting California's meager water supply. This just goes on and on. The real problem is the energy supply. So California's energy grid is stretched. Look at in New England what happened here, what's happening around the world. It's crazy. By the way, Diablo Canyon doesn't just generate more than 8% of all of California's electricity. It also accounts for 17% of the carbon-free production. So what's our goal here? We know the Jane Fonda and China syndrome was just a load of garbage. It doesn't happen. Can't happen. Look at the worst case we can think of, which was in Ukraine under the Soviet Union. Turned out to be bad, but wasn't that bad. Bottom line. And these new reactors, this won't happen. This can't happen. Completely new designs. The scientists are following something called physics. Yeah, okay. So it goes on and on. The anti-nuclear movement started in California. Environmentalists have opposed nuclear power, primarily from fears about nuclear waste. Well, have a look at what's been going on with the batteries that have been taken out of electric cars. They are now sitting in storage. Huge lots of storage leaking into the environment. And that's not even talking about the manufacture of these batteries and how toxic it is to the environment. I wish they would just be honest and look at all of this stuff, right? Really, come on. Anyways, you might have a neighbor. Have you seen these green means go signs in yards? And they're pointing out how an F-150 guzzles a gallon of gasoline for every 25 road miles. But he ignores that it took tens of thousands of pounds of CO2 emissions to produce the battery that charges his Tesla. And don't even tell him where the cobalt in the battery comes from, where the nickel comes from. Yeah, on and on, right? Anyways. On utility scale, solar power has a carbon footprint higher than nuclear power, or solar panels produce literally tons of toxic waste. I mean, a lot of it. So I'm going to try and dig up for next week the hard numbers. What's the hard numbers? What are the hard truths? You'll get it in my Monday newsletter, CraigPeterson.com, for the free newsletter right now. CraigPeterson.com/subscribe. And I'll see you guys there. Take care.